with the mountain of evidence piling up against Donald Trump in the impeachment probe, and Republicans openly experimenting with different and sometimes contradicting ways to combat or distract from that evidence. Now, the evidence is, as you may have noticed, pretty hard to counter directly. So we have seen other strategies. Some senators literally just sprinting from cameras without any comment whatsoever. Others in the House storming that secure location yesterday and complaining as well that closed interviews and depositions are unfair. Now, top Democrats have pushed back on those, call them process critiques, by stressing that private interviews are routine for gathering facts in this kind of case, and they prevent witnesses from trying to match stories in any potential cover-up. They've also said, these Democrats, that public hearings will come. And now there is news. Democrats are prepping a new phase of this impeachment probe, planning public hearings on the case for impeaching President Trump within weeks and as early as mid-November. The Washington Post reporting the star witnesses will include Ambassador Bill Taylor, who, of course, was acting ambassador to Ukraine and not only spoke out on the quid pro quo or bribe issues, but really upended this impeachment probe this very week with that bombshell testimony that significantly advanced details in the evidence against the president, and specifically recounted the administration conditioning Ukraine money on getting a probe of a Donald Trump rival. Democrats also plan to hold a public hearing with Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, who was on the inside and was an alleged target of the whole Ukrainian Giuliani plot. And that's not all. The Post is reporting in this same story that I'm mentioning to you that Democrats want to get John Bolton into a public hearing, noting that he made known all around the White House his visceral opposition to the Giuliani campaign on Ukraine. And the Post reporting testimony from Bolton could be particularly devastating for the White House, although it was unclear whether Democrats would subpoena him. So the Democrats' offense here, their strategy is coming into view. First, gather evidence from many of these witnesses in private, then focus on a few key witnesses for hearings in public. So take just these three names. Each worked at high levels for the Trump administration, each in various rooms as the Ukraine plot unfolded. Each has public service credentials, and they can detail a fact-driven case of the evidence that House Democrats say would help impeach Donald Trump. And note something else here, and this is pretty straightforward, but worth pausing on. This is all a contrast to past House hearings about the Mueller report, which didn't feature key witnesses like, say, Don McGahn or Paul Manafort. And if the Washington Post reporting is correct that these witnesses could be devastating to Trump, also note the top Republicans have now boxed themselves in to supporting these potentially devastating hearings. Maybe it is a case of be careful what you wish for. If everyone agrees, the fair thing is to launch into these public impeachment hearings. Now, not all Republicans are focused on only process. Trump has been publicly demanding they get tougher in defending him, and now key ally Lindsey Graham is pushing the Senate to formally condemn the House impeachment probe, adding this today about Trump and the infamous Ukraine call.
He keeps telling us he did nothing wrong. He keeps telling me that the phone call was perfect. I'm saying, Mr. President, the phone call was okay with me.
All right. Now, when you read Senator Graham's actual brand new resolution, and I have it right here, it does not propose a law or even suggest the Senate do anything. Instead, what this does is criticize the House. In fact, if you flip to the end, it's only 5 pages, it lists basically 3 things that it calls on Speaker Pelosi to do. Hold a floor vote about the current probe, give the president due process, and give away subpoena powers to the Republican minority of the House, which is not how the House is typically organized. Now, let me be clear with you. Senator Graham knows the House doesn't take orders from the Senate or vice versa. And the Senate also has the upper hand here, because any impeachment, if there is one, will ultimately go to the Senate for the final call, a trial or acquittal or conviction. So this resolution is basically mostly theater today. It doesn't impact the probe at all. But as Senator Graham was trying to score those points along the way, he did end up endorsing Trump's Ukrainian call. Okay with me, he said. And that will become key to all of this if the House impeaches. The Senate, at that point, cannot just pass resolutions criticizing the House or any other part of the government. It will have to act. It will have to hear and decide on a case. And some senators may say anything goes, or anything goes if it's in their party. or they're okay with the president, apparently, according to multiple witnesses, extorting a political bribe from a foreign country. Others may not be okay with that. They may decide that some votes, maybe very few votes, maybe just one vote, but some votes can be bigger than politics or news cycles, that some votes actually still, around here, they still make history, and they certainly determine how history remembers you. I want to get into all of that right now with a great panel of experts with me. Christina Greer, political science professor at Fordham, a digital journalism pioneer, Jacob Weisberg, and Vince Warren, executive director at the Center for Constitutional Rights. Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
Hey, Harry.
I begin with you on the point that even in a cynical environment where people like to ignore facts, is it the case that not every senator or every Republican senator will jump to the Lindsey Graham position that was unfurled today, which is it's all good, it's all Gucci, it's all okay?
Yeah, they won't and they shouldn't. The Republicans totally overplayed their hand when they stormed the Bastille and they were like, these things are happening in private, they need to be in public. They've been running around trying to defend the president, which essentially is an indefensible position, at the same time as the president is trying to get his the folks that can give information to Congress to not do it. There was a letter that went from the administration, the State Department, to Laura Cooper's lawyers saying that we don't think that these hearings are fair. You shouldn't testify, because one of the reasons is because they're not allowing State Department lawyers to come in. Now, of course, they're not going to let State Department lawyers come in because the State Department is essentially at issue here, what was going on there. So the administration is trying to push back.
You're saying that the Democrats' theory of the case, whether it's proven or not, is that the problem is parts of the State Department were being pulled into the commission of a crime.
Absolutely, and that's what the information is demonstrating. And for Republicans to, once this information comes out, they're going to have a choice to make as to whether they're going to, stay with the president and his big mouth and anything goes, or they're actually going to look at some of the evidence and say, what does history demand that we do as Congress to rebalance the powers of the administration and our congressional allies?
Yeah, and coming after yesterday, which may have been a theatrical stunt of all the House Republicans basically chanting, people used to say, no justice, no peace. They were saying no public hearings, no peace.
This was like the skiff sit-in.
Right. Which, and we discussed on the show yesterday that it, in the attempt to do the civil disobedience analogies, it wears thin quickly, but at least their argument was, we're going to shut this down even though we work here and we know the rules. But today you have the Post and you have the other indications saying, right, okay, no peace until we have public hearings. We're going to have a bunch of public hearings.
I think we tend to look at this through a Watergate lens, but there's an important difference. In Watergate, Republicans were fundamentally loyal to President Nixon until the evidence got so powerful that it overwhelmed their loyalty. There is no loyalty to Donald Trump. What there is self-interest and fear. These Republicans think their odds of keeping their jobs, of getting reelected, are better if they stick with Trump, who's still 80+% with Republicans, than if they if they switch sides.
Well, let's pause on that, because you're making a very deep point, I think. And I'm going to invoke Christina Greer, whose views I'm familiar with. Christina Greer of 2019 has the same view of Donald Trump as Lindsey Graham of 2015. Illegitimate, race-baiting bigot. I'm quoting the senator, and you said those things on this program.
Specifically.
The difference that you're drawing is, as Trump accrued more power, these people have publicly pretended otherwise.
But he's only renting them by the hour. And the day their self-interest appears to be greater getting rid of Trump, they'll jump in a second. And that's why it looks like a wall right now. It looks like the Republicans are holding firm. But if Trump's Republican support dropped from 80% to 60%, you would see Republicans in swing districts and in swing states, I think, switch sides. It's like the show Succession. There's no loyalty. They're just temporary alliances.
Who's Jerry?
I really got to watch this show.
Well, Jerry's the very ruthless but brilliant general counsel.
Well, it depends which side, right? I mean, Rudy
Giuliani.
Yeah.
Early Rudy.
Early Rudy.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, this reminds me, what you're saying reminds me of Machiavelli, actually, which is provinces that are easily won are easily lost. So Donald Trump is building this coalition of men who are afraid of him, who are doing whatever they can. It is theater. They are going in front of the cameras. Donald Trump has already castigated the media, and they're pledging their loyalty. We see this every Sunday when they go on the Sunday shows. We see this with every press conference where they know that he is watching television, because that's what he does as the president of the United States. The problem is Donald Trump has broken so many norms in the beginning parts of his presidency that he thought that that was okay. You know, the language he uses, sort of his hiring and firing practices, the fact that we haven't had a press secretary actually give any sort of response to the nation. The difference is now we're realizing that he's breaking laws, bribery, quid pro quo, talking to foreign leaders and giving them information about our interests, our intentions. And so he doesn't fundamentally understand the presidency, as I have said from day one. And I know for a fact that he's not read the Constitution. And had he read the Constitution, he would realize that in Article 1 of the Constitution is the legislative branch. And they have a significant amount of power. And he doesn't understand how the House can conduct themselves in a manner where he's just not the king and not in charge. And so had he read the Federalist Papers, he would understand that the separation of powers in Federalist 51 make it such that all branches are equal in the eyes of the founding fathers. So because he doesn't have an understanding of the United States government and our operations and our practices, he is now painting himself consistently in a corner, and we're going to see him lashing out and demanding things of his sycophants, and they're going to do it temporarily until they realize he is a walking embodiment of quicksand, and they're going to have to leave him at some point in time.
Let me come to you.
They will sort of stand up for the nation and not just for a man.
And thinking about Lindsey Graham, who clearly was, by the way, you know, an attorney and is very close to the president and is kind of self-volunteering to be the lead here, just as he was with Kavanaugh on behalf of the president. Yeah. Let's look a little bit at the history of Lindsey Graham on these very issues. Take a look.
The process you're engaging in regarding the attempted impeachment of President Trump is out of bounds.
A meaningful presentation on why the House managers and the House of Representatives believe Bill Clinton committed high crimes.
A lot of people want to get Trump, and they don't give a damn about how they get him.
To cut this trial short, to leave these criminal allegations unanswered, will do a lot of damage.
I think it's dangerous to the presidency.
So I don't know if he knows that we have YouTube, we have the old
An impeachable offense is not the same as a crime. We've got to keep coming back to this point. There are crimes that are not impeachable offenses, like if Donald Trump punched somebody, could be a felony but not an impeachable offense. And there are impeachable offenses that are not crimes. Impeachable offenses are abuses of power.
Yeah, and I think punching somebody almost goes, it sounds like something serious. It's a felony, as Vince can remind us, to destroy a mailbox, right?
Right.
But any president, any public official who happened to destroy a mailbox is unlikely to be impeached for it.
Unless they were trying to destroy some evidence against them inside the letter, inside the mailbox. But the Bill Taylor testimony was one of those things that, you know, we're so inured to Trump after all the outrages, but that really brought home again how shocking and outrageous this behavior was. I mean, first of all, what he was doing to Ukraine, a small, independent European nation that's an ally, that has part of the country under siege from Russia, that is living on the lifeline of our military aid. To hold that military aid, to hold them hostage based on a personal political demand of the president is something that should make every American and every Republican and Lindsey Graham mad as hell. And that Bill Taylor, this guy who is clearly not a partisan, who is a lifetime public servant, didn't want to be in this position, didn't want to be there, but has spent his career defending the country, a Vietnam veteran. I mean, you got to look at this guy and say something is wrong that this man is being put in this position.
Totally, I totally agree. And, you know, getting back to Christina's view of the Constitution is the floor below which no president should go. And what we're hearing from the Republicans now is that the Democrats are somehow holding the Constitution over the president's head. And if they're holding the Constitution over the president's head, that will tell you how low this president and this administration has gone, to the point where loyal State Department officials are defying orders not to testify in order to say that this is actually more important than this blind fear fealty
Well, and that
to
goes,
a tyrant.
that connects this whole conversation, Christina, right? Because the fact that you have people saying we won't testify, and then people saying private hearings are bad, but we don't really want public hearings. And then we don't really want to get into it. I mean, what is so fascinating in the contrast we mentioned earlier in our reporting to the Mueller report was the key people spoke to Mueller in private, but they wouldn't speak in public, at least in a reasonable amount of time. And that actually kind of froze up a stalemate there, where you had a lot of Democrats for impeachment and a lot not. And that's kind of where it ended after all that. And here, in a matter of weeks, the number of public officials, including people like, as mentioned, Taylor, Yovanovitch, to some degree Bolton, if the reports are correct, these are basically either nonpartisan people or people who are willing to take senior posts in the Trump administration, Bolton being a conservative. And it's exactly their evidence that can come out in public hearings and change everything.
Right. But what I think you're saying is that it's going to be our regular public servants who are going to possibly save this democracy. The people that we have elected to represent us, we have seen that a vast majority of Republicans have not been doing their job. They have pledged their loyalty to the president and not to the country. And so when we move forward with this, I mean, there's so much fear of people who work in and around this presidency because they know that Donald Trump can only have fiefdoms, right? And we've talked about how he never really had real boards. He had one or two companies that had a board, but the vast majority of his businesses, it's just him as the king, everyone does as he says. And so he thinks, why can't we just do this in D.C.? And so moving forward, we have to get more and more Republicans to understand that if they do not act now, they're really essentially destroying the democracy, and whether they're doing it so that they can run for office later,
right,
or have a little payout, or they're afraid of something from their past. It's like, get over it.
Well,
we need the nation to move forward.
And that's a point we've made in our reporting. That's the difference between the alleged Russian collusion in 2016 and the bribery plot for 2020. 2016, people can disagree about it, but even Bob Mueller, and I read that report more than once, did not conclude that the evidence showed an election crime plot. So that's where that landed for Mueller. And here, whether it's Mr. Bolton talking about the crack pipe and the drug crime and the get me out of the conspiracy, or these civil servants, and you all just detailed it, I'm not going to repeat it, or other experts that we're reading about are all saying, no, this is a plot. It looks like a crime, and it's coming from inside the White House. If you don't step up to that, then you're kind of saying in public, it's okay to do election crime. And as you say, that brings in the democracy in peril. I have to get a break. Final thought?
Well, we need people to come out of the shadows, and it is a very difficult thing to do, and they will be sort of the saviors of the democracy. But a lot of these anonymous reports, in some ways, aren't helpful because the president hides behind the fact that it's anonymous, so it has to be made up.
And you're talking about the difference. Some of the whistleblowers remain anonymous. More and more people come out. It's all happening, and that's what makes it such an interesting time to follow it. Christina Greer, Jacob Weisberg, Vince Warren, a deep conversation. I appreciate it. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.